To welcome everyone to our Committee of the Whole meeting for February 18th, 2025. We have an agenda in front of us that was pre-circulated. Does anyone have any updates or changes to it? Councillor Christie.
If not, I'll move the agenda as presented.
Great. All those in favor? Carried. We also pre-circulated our minutes of the December 3rd COW meeting. Any conversation needed to arise from the minutes? Looking for a motion. Reeve King.
I make the motion to approve the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from December 3rd as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. So our new business, we have water and wastewater review. We have two presenters. Welcome. And when you're ready, go ahead.
Good morning, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present the findings from Administration's Water and Wastewater Review today. Before I begin, I would like to express my appreciation to all the departments that contributed to gathering the data and information needed for this report. The goal of this presentation and report is to provide you with an update on the county's water and wastewater systems, outlining key findings and considerations. With that, let's begin. I will begin by outlining the key assumptions that guided the development of this report. From there, I will provide a brief background and an overview of the proposal, followed by an analysis of the various system components, and finally, I will discuss the key considerations explored in the report. With that, let's start reviewing the assumptions. As directed by Council, Administration has conducted a high-level review of the county's water and wastewater systems. This review aims to provide a clearer picture of the operational aspects of the county's utilities. The data reflects the most accurate figures achievable with the available resources. To improve available resources, the county is committed to enhancing our asset management capabilities to increase data accuracy. The operational revenue and expenses for both systems are sourced from Microsoft GP. However, it is important to mention that these figures do not include certain organizational functions such as the safety program and office building utilities and maintenance. Lastly, rather than analyzing each of the 13 individual water systems the county operates, this review looks at the utility system as a whole. I'll move on to the background. At its core, the county's water system is designed to deliver safe, reliable, and potable water to its residents. This is achieved through daily compliance checks, routine maintenance, and quick responses to any issues. Regular water testing ensures the system meets safety standards. Currently, the system serves about 50% of the county, including both rural areas and the hamlets of Huxley, Swalwell, Torrington, and Wimborne. The infrastructure consists of 900 kilometers of pipeline, 9 reservoirs, 9 pump houses, and 2 booster stations. Huxley and Wimborne rely on groundwater wells, while the other areas receive water through regional distribution systems. The county also actively monitors 843 utility accounts and 567 bulk water accounts to ensure proper service coverage and accurate billing. In terms of recent improvements, several key upgrades have been completed. These upgrades help address aging infrastructure and compliance with evolving guidelines. The county's average daily water distribution is 615 cubic meters with an annual distribution of 224,575 meters cubed across all serviced areas. I will move on to the various system analysis from this point. This review assesses the extent to which the county's water and wastewater systems rely on general tax subsidies. The goal is to provide a clear picture of the current financial state and support discussions on potential future directions. In 2024, the county's utility system generated $1.3 million in operational revenue, while operational expenses totaled around $2.1 million. This resulted in a shortfall of $801,531 of a shortfall, meaning 38% of the system had to be subsidized through general taxes. As it stands, the water and wastewater systems require continued financial support from the county. To move towards greater sustainability, operational revenue would need to increase. Currently, revenue is generated through monthly fees billed to customers, penalties, fees, other fees, and contract services. To better align revenue with expenses and reduce reliance on tax subsidies, administration assessed a universal water rate of $6.63 per cubic meter. This would be the rate required to achieve cost recovery. This adjustment would more accurately reflect the true cost of running the system. For wastewater, administration explored a model that combines a monthly service fee and a usage-based fee, ensuring that costs are fully covered while maintaining fairness for users. On this slide is the water and bulk water distribution data from 2020 to 2024. In 2024, around 301 cubic meters of combined water was distributed. The chart on the right highlights calculated water loss as part of the overall distribution assessment. Water loss is an inevitable part of water distribution. According to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, water loss can range from below 10% to over 50% in losses for older systems. Environment Canada estimates the national average loss to be around 13%. These losses typically result from aspects such as leaks and infrastructure usage. For the purposes of this review, administration is accounting for a 10% water loss, which aligns with the condition and operational realities of the county's system. The county's water supply is sourced from 4 main systems: the Three Hills Distribution, Aqua 7, Churchill Water System, and groundwater wells. The total revenue amount is a combination of water distribution sales and bulk water sales, and the breakdown is provided on the slide. Water distribution sales revenue include user fees based on usage, penalties, and other fees, including the flat maintenance fee and contract services. On the expense side, total costs include both water distribution and bulk water expenses. Due to the complexity and integration of these systems, a detailed breakdown by individual system is not available at this time. However, the total expenses include purchased water, salaries, utilities, testing and training, maintenance and repairs, and more. Looking at the 2024 financials, the county's total water system revenue was around $1.3 million, while expenses reached around $1.9 million. As a result, Kneehill County subsidized approximately 34% of the system, totaling $682,321. To better understand the extent of the subsidy, administration analyzed revenues and expenses on a per cubic meter basis. In 2024, the county generated $4.37 in revenue for every cubic meter of water, while the cost to provide that same cubic meter was $6.63. That means the county subsidized $2.26 per cubic meter to cover the difference. The calculations for the previous years are displayed in the table. The report applied the same analysis to the wastewater system to determine the current level of county subsidization. Kneehill County operates four wastewater systems: Huxley, Swalwell, Torrington, and Wimborne. The goal here is to understand how much the county contributes through taxes to sustain these wastewater systems. Revenue comes primarily from monthly fees, while expenses cover a range of costs, including salaries, sewer main flushing, actizyme treatment, fuel, lab testing, and other operational needs. In 2024, the county subsidized 89% of the wastewater system, totaling $119,210. This is due to the revenue being $14,492, while expenses reached approximately $133,702. Not all water used returns to the wastewater system. The wastewater return factor estimates that 90% of distributed water is returned and treated, and that's the basis for our calculations here under the wastewater treated column. The chart here shows the per cubic meter amounts of the wastewater system from 2020 to 2024. Revenue per cubic meter has been quite consistent, averaging around 42 cents annually. However, when examining cost per cubic meter, it is clear that the expenses are significantly higher. In 2024, the cost was $4.09 per cubic meter compared to the revenue of 44 cents. This gap results in a subsidy per cubic meter ranging from $2.47 to $3.64 over the past 5 years. This slide shows the combined analysis of both water and wastewater over the past 5 years. Looking at the total sanitary system subsidy, which represents the amount the county needs to cover through taxes, it is clear that the total subsidy has remained steady yet significant each year. In 2024, the county subsidized $801,530 or 38% of the total system's expenses, a slight increase from 45% in 2021, but still a substantial portion. Similar to the other system analysis, this is the analysis on a per cubic meter basis, which allows for a clearer picture of how much it costs to provide water and wastewater services compared to the revenues collected. Administration will now present some exploratory considerations for the committee. These scenarios are for analysis purposes only and not proposals for immediate implementation. The goal is to provide insight into what achieving full cost recovery could look like if that were the direction council wished to pursue. This includes exploring an optimized water rate scenario, a wastewater usage and service charge, and potential levy and tax options. On January 28, 2025, Council passed the Master Rates Bylaw number 1912, introducing updated water rates across the county. Currently, water rates vary by system. The general water distribution system is set at $4.05 per cubic meter, while Huxley and Wimborne systems charge $2.55 per cubic meter. Bulk water stations operate at $5.15 per cubic meter with an additional minimum monthly fee of $10 per bill. To provide a clearer picture of what full cost recovery would require, administration has modeled a scenario in which a single unified rate is applied across all systems. Based on 2024 operational costs of $1.9 million, achieving cost recovery would require a universal rate of $6.63 per cubic meter. This approach would eliminate the need for a tax subsidy, taking the system from a subsidy model to a cost recovery model if council so chooses. Wastewater rates have remained relatively unchanged for the past few years. Administration has explored a wastewater fee system based on water usage with a rate of $2.51 per cubic meter, while incorporating a fixed monthly wastewater service charge of $20. This dual fee structure is designed to more accurately reflect the cost of collecting and treating wastewater in the county and has been incorporated by other municipalities such as the City of Calgary. With this example, the projected annual revenue would be around $133,830, covering the 2024 total sanitary system operating expense of $133,702. Under the Municipal Government Act, there are several mechanisms available to municipalities for generating revenue to support infrastructure and utility systems. Section 382 to 389 is the special tax section, which outlines the process by which municipal councils can levy special taxes to fund broad municipal services or purposes that benefit the entire municipality, such as water and sewer system projects. Section 391 to 409 is the local improvement tax system, which funds targeted infrastructure projects. These taxes are charged to properties directly benefiting from the improvements and can be spread over a set period. And lastly, Section 648 are off-site levies. These levies are charged to developers to fund essential infrastructure for new developments, including water and sewage. These fees must be used exclusively for capital projects that benefit the development as outlined in the levy bylaw. Thank you so much for your attention, and we will take questions at this time.
Thank you. So just to reiterate, this is just information we would need if we went full cost recovery. It is certainly not even a suggestion. It is information we requested. So we don't want anyone to feel like, oh my gosh, we're making a decision to do something very specific here. This is so that we can gather all the information we possibly could have so we can look at the whole spectrum of choices that we have. Given that that's the context, does anyone have any questions for more information from our presenter? Mr. Christie.
Just as comment to John, as you've kept the expenses pretty flat or actually gone down a little bit. So in the environment we've been in the last 4 years, I'm impressed.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Forbes.
So when you're determining the water, sorry, through the chair to Mr. Hogan, when you're determining, I see that you have expenses which include purchase water, salaries, utilities, testing, training. Is there a way that I could see a breakdown to what each of those are percentage-wise? Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, how many staff are we talking about? Are we talking about 1 or are we talking about 5? I don't know that information. I'm looking for that.
Mr. Hogan.
Through the chair, we can provide some of that data. At the end of the day, it all ties into what the overall expenses are. The staff component, we require the operators to meet Alberta environment testing and to respond to things. So we're definitely not overstaffed in that area, but we can provide some of that base data. It won't change the overall numbers that are presented.
Go ahead, Councillor Forbes.
So then if it doesn't change the numbers, why are you presenting it in the RFD then?
Go ahead, Mr. Hogan. Do you need clarification on that question?
Through the chair, I believe I do.
Yeah, I did too. Sorry.
So I'm looking at it and you're presenting stuff in and you're saying that here's we're going to include all of the costs of, these are the expenses that are calculated into the cost of the water per month based on the usage, plus what we're doing out there for services for our employees. So if you can't provide what the utilities, the power and the heat is for that, for each of, so you've, sorry, let me take a deep breath and start again. It's just one of those days. I'm looking at this and I'm like, you've provided that you've used testing, training, maintenance, repairs, fuels, telephone software, engineering services. What is that breakdown going into that water price that you're creating?
Through the chair, I mean, we can put percentages to that. The statement in the RFD was indicating what all expenses are included in, pardon me, which all expenses are included in the numbers that you've shown today. The purpose of highlighting that in the RFD was to indicate that some things are not included in that number. So as an example, I believe safety was mentioned. Safety is a corporate cost. We don't break out the cost of the county safety program by department. So any relation, so while we would assume that, well, not assume, we know that safety is covering off all departments, we haven't attributed a cost of the safety program to a specific department. So the list is not to, you know, at the end of the day, the percentages as they are that relate to the overall expense are almost irrelevant to the number. Our point in putting them in the RFD was to indicate there are things that are not included in that number, such as the safety program is probably the best example. The other parts that are not in there, all of those individual items are operational in nature. So when we're putting out that rate of $6 and change per cube, that actually doesn't include any capital costs associated with the water system. So that is just the operating cost recovery. That's not the full operating and life cycling cost recovery. So in putting them in the RFD, we're showing you here are all the components that went into this number. So all of the staff costs that are related to running the water and wastewater system are included in that number, as an example. So really the list in the RFD was just to say here, when you add in all these things, that's what's coming to the number.
It's like a definition. Thank you. And so, because we're talking about discussing the theory on the spectrum, a lot of those details, especially the ones that you're not included, will likely stay the same regardless of what we do. So the discussion isn't about where the money goes, it's about this is the reality. Which theory of cost recovery do we want? Do we want 100% cost recovery? Are we happy where we're at? Or what in between all of that are we going to suggest? So that analysis would be this, those details would still make our conversation the same. Reeve King.
So just, maybe this would help a little bit, and I don't know if it will or not. Can you give me an idea of what our current costs from Aqua 7, water charge per meter cube is, and from the town of Three Hills? Do we have those numbers?
Yeah, so we, through the chair, we can provide those. We'll just need to dig them up. We don't have them at our fingertips, but we'll get them quickly.
And I guess the reason I'm asking that question is you've outlined currently what we've outlined as council, what our, in our master rates bylaw, what we're charging for water. So I'm assuming that what we're charging is still more than what we're paying, but I'd like to see that difference. And I know we've had that information before, but it's just not right in front of me. And that would then give me an idea of if this is what I'm actually paying per cube for water, then the other difference between whatever that number is all those other costs for operating the system. My assumption is we're not losing money on the actual water itself, that we're billing more than what it's actually costing us. So if we looked at our 2025 rates, I'm assuming the 405 per meter cube that we're charging for water that's being delivered to everywhere but Wimborne and Huxley is above the cost that we're actually paying to either Three Hills or Aqua 7. So to get to the $6.63, my assumption then would be is that that's utilities, that's labor, that's all the other things that are on top of that. Correct in that assumption?
Go
Through the
ahead.
chair, yeah, you'd be correct. I mean, obviously, the cost of the water that we purchase is included. But if we're obviously charging more than what we're paying out, then the rest of that is the operational costs of salaries, training, water testing, all that, utilities, you know, heat, electricity, right? That kind of stuff would be the remainder of that.
And I also realize in a water system, a lot of the things that we have to do from the safety point of view are mandated by legislation. And so the gentlemen that we have running around to our various plants, testing and taking samples, that's all part of the legislated mandate, correct?
Through the chair, yeah, it'd be all ONHS, right? I mean, everything that someone does for PPE would be pretty much similar to what we do as well. We'll have a little extra like a smock or a face guard for our chlorine, just extras like that, confined space, you know, fall protection, all that kind of stuff is all kind of the training that we take, but so do, you know, the rest of the county employees because they may find themselves in those situations as well. So.
Mr. Hogan.
Through the chair, an answer to the question was asked. The rate from Aqua 7 is $3.54 per cube, and the current rate from the town of Three Hills is $2.80 per cube.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to add on to Mr. King's question is that through the water and wastewater, provincial requirements for legislation are determined by the complexity of your system or the size of your system. So the type of employees and the level of certification you're required are actually mandated. And the amount of employees you require are actually mandated as well for your systems.
Thank you. Any other clarifications or information? If not, we're good. Yes, sure, go ahead, Ms.
Thanks for what you put together here. It's really appreciated, lots of numbers and whatever. But in summary, 34% of water is subsidized and 89% of wastewater we are subsidizing, correct? I'm reading it correct here?
Go ahead.
That'd be right, yep.
Thank you. Okay, so, sure, Reeve King.
So on the wastewater side, currently what are we charging on a bi-monthly basis or? Because I see we're bringing in about 15,000, well, 14.5 in revenue, so how's that generated?
Right. So through the chair, we have a monthly fee for each hamlet, so, but they're all different. For example, on this side, it's basically in Huxley, they get charged $2.33 a month. But in Swalwell, they get charged $6.12 per month. Torrington is $3.45 per month, and Wimborne is $14.54 per month. So those, excuse me, those charges have been in play for probably the last at least 15 years and haven't been changed from my recollection. I assume that they came into play based off of when that infrastructure was put in place, that, you know, it was, hey, this lagoon is gonna cost this much, so we need to charge this much for our monthly fee. So I guess what we're looking at is a more evenly based one. Is what was how we modeled it, was a more evenly based across all hamlets, with a flat fee, but also off of a personal usage. Where if you use 10 cubes of water, you get charged 90 cubes going into wastewater, kind of thing, at a different rate, kind of thing. That's how we kind of modeled it, so.
So just as follow-up, then currently our, our current system has nothing to do with water being used. It's measuring the water, it's just a flat fee that we're charging. And each of our wastewater systems has a different flat fee. So what's being suggested or contemplated would be that we look at a system where we charge a per cube sewage wastewater fee and then a flat fee as well. So there'd be let's say a $10 a month or whatever it happens to be fee, or bi-monthly, whatever that turns out to be, plus a per cube charge. That's what you're contemplating?
So through the chair, yeah, that's kind of pretty much exactly what we modeled in this thing. Like I said, it's not, anything up for here isn't, we're not, it's more information, not a kind of a request for a decision type thing, but more just this is what we do. And we went that way because if you look at most of the municipalities, that's kind of how they've all gone now, is they'll charge a flat rate plus a usage, personal usage on their wastewater. So we modeled it after different municipalities. Many of this, you know, municipalities around like the urbans, you know, that it's kind of a standard practice now to kind of charge wastewater that way.
Thank you. Councillor Phobes.
Sorry, this question is what ways do we lose water within our county lines? Can you just give us a quick update for that? I've had a couple questions from some ratepayers that asked that question. Like how do we manage when we find out we're losing water, and is there people out there that are tampering with our water lines to increase their flow? Because I've also heard that as well.
Sure. So any system will lose water in many different ways. Like if it's brand new, it's still, you know, there could be leaks that you can't identify because they're just weeping, right? So they're not really identifiable. But then you'll get the bigger leaks that you can't identify, you can search out, find. You'll also have operational usage. Our chlorine analyzers, they run constantly and they're always running through water through these things, right? So you have a daily usage just off that operation. When you're testing water, you don't just open up the tap, take it, close it. The water runs for a little while. That'll add up just through the testing procedures. To get to Other things, yeah, there's probably people that do tamper with our infrastructure. We're in a rural system, so if somebody cracks open one of those curb stops that are not being in use and start using the water, depending on how they use it, we may not even notice it, right? Or we have flow regulation on all our systems at 4 imperial gallons per minute. There may be people that don't think that satisfies their needs, so it's just as simple as isolating it, drilling it, and there you go, you got some more. Unfortunately, we can start to recognize that. Our SCADA system that's in place, when we have a leak, we'll notice flows have increased. If those increases stay consistent for a few days, then we start investigating. We start isolating lines to see where does our flow actually start dipping, right? And so we can go around and investigate where leaks are. And when we notice that flows are increased over a few amount of days, then we go out and investigate. And it'll either turn out to be a leak, it'll turn out to be somebody abusing the system by taking the water. So eventually we will find it. Our new meters that we have in place now, these new meters, they actually give us a lot of information. They'll tell us if there's leaks, they'll tell us if there's irregular usage. We can go back and we can data these things, and we can look in the recent past to see when peak flows happen, low flows, so we can actually, through technology, we can find a lot of those things. So our losses mostly are, like I said, will be operational and the inevitable water breaks that we'll see. So.
Thank you. Councillor Woodstock.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to, I don't know what I was going to do, but I guess number one is the only place we're going to be short on water is in front of a water meter, regardless of whoever messes with their valves. That water is still metered and billed to them. Again, I don't know, our fire departments, when they do their practices or at actual scenes, does anybody even keep track of how much water is being used through those systems? And not sure if that would show up as being a loss in the water system or not. And it's really tough with water because you can't predict if you're going to get a leak and you don't know if it's going to be on the weekend or whenever it's going to be. And I know the water department looks very carefully at the records. And it's just one of those things. Leaks will happen. Generally, the ones that you don't really recover are the ones that are prior to hitting meters. So I guess we can do the best we can, but that's about the only thing I've got to add.
Thank you. Mr. McCarron, I see
Yeah.
you might want to respond.
Oh, yeah, just through the chair, for the fire departments, if they use the fire hydrants, then no, there isn't really a way of determining how much they've used, because it's not metered through the truck or anything like that. But a lot of the fire departments will use the bulk stations, and so then that stuff would be metered and we know how much was going out that way. But yeah, just to add on, I guess we do also do water line flushing through the hamlets as well. So that's also water loss as well, like the fire. So there is that kind, but that's an operational thing, right? So that's why they say usually it's around 30%, because they include flushing, they include that operational stuff. So that's why we use that water loss in there, just to kind of give you an idea.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because basically we're saying this is just standard of having a municipal water system. You need to expect that that's what it's going to be. This isn't a preventable or neglect thing. This is just the way water is utilized in all municipalities. You need to expect that kind of loss. Thank you. Councillor Penner.
I don't know what program you use, and I don't need to know, but it's phenomenal. And you'll know what I'm talking about with the Swallow Community Centre. We got this massive bill, and it showed that something was running or there was a leak, and they were able to go back and tell me exactly which days, all that kind of stuff. Phenomenal program. Unfortunately, leaks in the rural area, quite often you don't know until they come to the surface, which takes some time, depending on the time of the year. But are our curb stops that are not in use, are they not all locked?
Through the chair, they're not locked. We could go and get that equipment to lock them, but they are shut off. But anybody with a little bit know-how could probably rig something up to turn them on if they had to. But we don't really encounter that quite often at all, right? So it's very rare.
Okay, no, and great answer. I know some in my area still got locks on them, which is great. It's all good. Not that I've tried to use them or whatever, but when I drive by them, I see the lock on them. And also when it comes to flushing, it's not just in the hamlets, it's those lines that are at the people at the end of the line too. You have to flush those lines sometimes. So there is a bit of loss for sure.
Just sorry, through the chair, those locks are you maybe speaking of the meter lifts that we put in place? Because those are lockable lifts because all our stuff is inside there. The curb stops, they would be just a little separate thing coming out of the ground, right? So.
I think the ones I'm seeing are because they're at the end of your line where you flush, they're hydrants.
Oh, they're hydrants.
The
Yeah.
hydrants are locked.
Through the chair, they're
Sorry.
hydrants. So we lock those so people can't, just open them up and let water flow. Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. Good to hear. Okay, so I think we're looking at a conversation amongst council of where we would like to see this move eventually. Do we like the way we have been handling water? Or do we need to see some changes in theory, and what do we want to do about that? Anyone ready to start with their opinion?
I still have questions.
Oh, my apologies, Councilor Reeve. King, go ahead with your question.
So talk to me, if you would please, particularly about local improvement and special tax levies in terms of how those might help cover some of the shortfall and how we might apply those to our system. So I assume special tax levies would be, and the local improvement taxes would be specific to the areas where we have water systems, but how might we utilize something like that to recover costs?
Go ahead, Mr. Ogun.
Through the Reeves, so we have some option there, and we can explore those further. Probably a special area tax would be the consideration. A local improvement tax is related directly to a local improvement and the cost of which that has been made. So that likely wouldn't apply in our case because the infrastructure is already all existing. So that's not necessarily the route we'd go. We could do more exploration on a special area tax. The benefit of something like that is that right now, under the current model or methodology that the county uses, any individual that has a riser to their property, there's a cost there being incurred from a life cycle perspective, but there's no bill being sent to that individual if they haven't hooked up to that riser. So there's really that property is serviced, even if they haven't connected to it, but there's no input from that property to any revenue that would be used to offset operating costs or life cycling costs. So what we presented here, as I said earlier, is the operating side only. So when you take the capital side and the life cycling cost, you're going to see that number go up, because the total amount of the subsidy will increase because that whole other side of the equation would be taken into account. So what money are you putting away into reserves to replace that water system, to do repairs, to replace pumps, those sorts of activities that fall on the capital side? Those are outside this report. That's an area that in the next, as we beef up asset management within the county and we get into other areas of the county, we'll have more data to put in there, but a lot of that doesn't exist in a great fashion now. So something that we're working on. But to that, and I guess I'm backing up in order to answer the question, but when Mr. McKiernan talked about it's standard in municipalities to have a flat rate and a usage fee, a lot of times what you'll see there, most times I'd say, is a portion of that, so say the flat part, is actually what's feeding the capital part of the system. So if you know that your life cycling cost is $100,000 a year, you'd collect $100,000 through the flat rates of your utility bills. That would go into reserves or into repairs. The operating costs would be related to the usage fee that you paid. That's not the model that the county has historically used. So even the flat portion of the bills that we send goes into general operating. The reserves in the past have been funded through those local area taxes that we've had, that some have expired and the others are expiring this year, next year. So those have come to an end, and the last ones are getting there. So we don't break up our bill to go into those different areas. That going forward might be a consideration, but there'll be impacts there as council looks at different options. To go back to those, say a special area tax, again, that's something that council could potentially look at. That would apply to the entire water area and the water areas. And what that essentially means is the areas serviced by those water systems, you'd have another line on your tax bill, would say special area water tax, and there'd be a fee associated with that depending on where council decided to go. If we do that, that fee does, I believe, I'd have to double check the MGA wording, but I believe that fee has to be tied back to stated costs and.
Thank you. Reeve King.
So I guess the reason I'm asking the questions is that I'm very cognizant that water cost has to be competitive for economic development and also to allow people to be able to afford to have safe water. So there has to be other ways to generate return to a water system. And in my mind, one of the reasons that we need to have this conversation is that, well, you say in your presentation that 50% of the county has water, 50% of the county does not. And as a consequence, 100% of the county subsidizes whatever costs that are being subsidized within both those systems. So I don't want to necessarily penalize people on water. That's not my objective. But I think we need to have a way to not necessarily have an extremely high water cost, which makes us unattractive from a development point of view, and yet have a way to support that system in some way beyond just general tax revenue. And so, especially in those lines where we have a bunch of stops where there's no connection, even though there's no connection there, there's still maintenance on those lines. There's still water breaks. There's still all those other things that we have to do, even though there's no revenue being generated from the fact that those stops are inactive. So how do we turn revenue to the whole system in some way that is generated in a fair way that reduces the amount of subsidy? And I'm not saying that we necessarily shouldn't have some level of subsidy, but what I am saying is we also have to be very careful on the actual cost to water. So to go from where we are today to $6.63 a meter cube, probably not realistic. And probably not very competitive with some surrounding municipalities. So then where do we find the balance? I guess that's what I'm getting at. And so that's why I asked about special tax levies or other ways to generate. And I like the idea of the flat fee, and then perhaps a per meter cost towards wastewater. And what that would be in the end, I don't know. So that's just where I'm sitting right now. So.
Thank you. Councillor Christie.
I want to poke a hole in your theory.
Go ahead.
My bulk water bill is probably bigger than most household water bills because I appreciate that clean water. My other question would be, all the chemicals I use on my farm have changed in the last 5 years. Is the disinfectant and all the stuff that you use to give us clean treated water, that water treatment chemical is standard, or is there options there, or it's pretty much a flat cost?
Thank you, Mr.
Through the
Kieran.
chair, so are you asking if the treatment changes very much or just the cost of the treatment?
I just know that my chemicals that I use that are totally off the wall from what you use, but is it standard like chlorine and all that kind of stuff? There's no options there. The cost has stayed pretty flat, or has it gone up or down?
Through the chair, the cost, I guess, has stayed fairly consistent for the last little while. I think just in the last couple of years, the cost of, we use sodium hypochlorite, which is just a form of it, but it's kind of increased a small amount. I don't have the exact percentage of what it's increased, but it has increased a little bit over the last few years, but it hasn't gotten absorbed, like, it hasn't gotten out of hand kind of thing, so.
Okay, thank you.
So for clarification, is it quite prescriptive of what chemicals you are to use for treatment, or do you have some choices in the matter?
We don't have, through the chair, we don't have much choice. We don't treat the source water. We basically just transport that water, right? So someone like the town of Drumhill or town of Three Hills, they could look at what their treatment is and what could be a more effective way or efficient way to treat. But right now, I mean, we could look into different things like filtration and stuff like that, but right now for disinfection, chlorine, the addition of chlorine seems to be, it's standard. It's probably the most commonly used, and it's probably the most effective and efficient way that we have right now.
Great, thank you. I think we have a lot of people who are interested in some of those details, so I appreciate the information a lot. Any other questions for our presenters or conversation to start have about theory or thought of where we go from here? We're only in theory mode here. We're not making any decisions. Councillor Forbes.
Do we know currently what Wheatland, Red Deer, if I just take the counties around us, are currently charging their ratepayers for water usage?
Mr. Hogan, did you want to take that, or?
Through the chair, I don't believe we've done that analysis. We might have some informal data. I don't know if we have any updated. Yeah.
Thank you. Reeve King.
So can we get that information? Could we do a little bit of research? One of the things, I guess, if we're going to talk about water rate and competitiveness from an economic development point of view, it is helpful to know what our neighboring municipalities are charging, and that doesn't necessarily just include the urbans within the confines of Kneehill County, but also our other rural potential competitors for economic development, which for us is critically important, I think. So if that's possible, I certainly would like to see that information. It would be helpful as we go forward in this conversation.
Through the chair, yeah, we can definitely get that done. I don't think we'd be able to tell you what they're subsidizing off those rates or anything like that.
No.
But we could just let you know what they're charging.
I guess we're just looking at what the retail rate is, basically.
Yeah, okay.
Because again, internally, who knows, right? In terms of what their operating costs and so on, and what the subsidy levels might be. But in terms of us setting a rate, so let's say I'm thinking about developing in Kneehill County and I'm going to use a lot of water, and I'm going to use our next door neighbor, Mountain View. And my option is to develop either here or there, and our water rate's $1 more than theirs, and I'm planning on using a lot of water. That might have some impact on where I choose to make my development. So to me, it's just a comparable. It's what I'm actually going to have to pay to get that cubic meter of water.
Councillor Penner.
And I think it's very important when you bring back that information that it's also curbside as well as bulk. Is what they're both charging, what they're all charging, sorry, those two different fees, or if they're the same.
Excellent. Yeah. Any other questions? How about some conversation? I'll throw in mine to get started thinking. I think this is a massively delicate topic because each type of user is going to have a different perspective of how we need to go forward with this. And so I think this will need a lot of public information available. My personal opinion is I would like to see some communication going out that sets out in a very simple form, what are we dealing with, and what are the questions we're looking to solve in the next short period of time. It's a very delicate point, and I think moving too quickly to make a change here would be really a strenuous thing on all of us. Anyone else have some feedback? Reeve King.
Well, I guess until we have an idea of where we might like to go, I don't really feel, I don't want to put something out there unless we're actually contemplating that. And I think this is the kind of thing where if we were contemplating making some serious changes, that we might want to do some public engagement on. So we're informing our ratepayers and our customers to the water system, what kind of changes we're contemplating, and perhaps offer an opportunity for feedback at that point.
Absolutely.
I think for myself at this point, I need some more information. And I think some of the questions asked today, if we have answers to those, that'll help move the conversation forward. I think philosophically, I've always been a believer that if you use it, you should pay for it. But I also recognize in public utilities, there's sometimes a much more difficult situation to try to make that happen. So, yeah, I think that there's room here for us to look at some opportunities, such as the special levies, such as perhaps a flat fee and a per charge on the cubic meter of water being used and going into our wastewater system. So, but at this point, I don't know that I'm prepared to go much further. So.
No, and I apologize for not being clear. That is what I mean, that this needs to be part of the project as we move forward, not that it's where we start today. But I also think we can't start public information until we have the asset assessment done. I think that is a key point to how we go forward. Councillor Woodstock.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess we had a local improvement tax on water when we first got in the water lines. The last one of those is done here in 2025. We do have a dedicated water reserve. I don't know how much is in it, but there is a water reserve, and it is restricted to only water. So, I guess number one, you can only use that for upgrades, I'm assuming? And if there was actually a special area tax put on in those water areas, I wouldn't be opposed to that, because there is a benefit in those areas to have a special water tax. If that water is pretty much on every quarter, they have access, people have the access to hook into that. They may have to pay for the riser, they may have to do something else, but you don't have to drill a well. You have an option there. So that does benefit that area. The other thing is all those risers that are out there that are not being used, well, they were forced. Whether you wanted a riser or not, you got one, because that's the only way that we can make that whole system work. Unfortunately, they're sitting there not being used, and what's happening is we are having to, well, I don't think we have to deny anybody water yet, but we may come to the point that we're going to have to say, well, wait a minute, we can't give you water because this line is full up now. So we should need a special, or we should have some sort of a way to increase capacity, and I don't know, maybe that would be through the not dedicated, but restricted water reserve. But it's a hard question. I mean, we have to be competitive, not only our neighbors within the towns and villages, but also with our neighbors to the municipalities around us. I know Wheatland is charging quite a bit for water, but then their philosophy was, I think they ended up building a water treatment plant, so that makes quite a difference. But we got to be competitive, and we can't be sitting here saying that we're going to be charging cost recovery on water. And I'm strictly speaking water here because I don't know enough about the sewer side or the wastewater side that you can comment on, but on the water side, we have to be competitive, and a way to be competitive, I think, a special area tax would be one way to keep the water rates reasonable, but yet show that there is a benefit for those areas that the water, where the water is transmitted.
Thank you. Anyone else like to weigh in on some thoughts? I do think it's very clear that the days of, oh, it's just water is gone, and the culture of that way that we've taken for granted the luxury of water and the right to have it is going to be changing to being higher accountability to each user. And I think that's sad, but it's also the truth of our whole world. So, Reeve King.
So I had asked about water rates. Can we also ask for the wastewater side, where we could look at what our neighboring municipalities are doing on the wastewater side? You know, I'm not on a water system, but I have a water system. I'm not on a wastewater system, but I have a wastewater system. Neither of those things come free to me. There's costs associated with operating my well and my water system in my home, and there's large costs to having either a septic or other treatment system in a private system. So, but what we're competing with is our direct neighbors who are charging for both water and wastewater. So I think, I thought about the clean water side, but what about the wastewater side? So if we could get some information on that, I think that would be helpful too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Penner.
Just a comment, and I apologize because I can't remember what you guys had on your boards at the community discovery nights, John, but, and maybe some of this information, as a separate board at the display or whatever, just to show the residents how much it is subsidized. It's not saying we're gonna, and that just brings discussion within the county too, whether negative or positive, but, I think, I don't know, what does council think by having some of those kind of information? Doesn't matter which department, really. If there's, everybody should be aware of how much some of the stuff is subsidized.
I agree. I like that idea. How about anyone else? Any other discussion? What do we want to do from here? Do we want to receive the information? To receive it as information, we need to have a motion if we're done having our conversation. Or if not, someone needs to dive in and tell me, hey, I need to talk. Mr. Hogan.
Through you, Chair, I think that, and I apologize for my voice today. The cold weather has gotten to me. I think through the discussion, rather than accept for information, I think the recommendation would be that you request that the discussion come back to a future committee of the whole meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Phobes.
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion to bring further information to another cow meeting. Do we have an opportunity to look at the motion made, or do we need to go without that, Carolyn? Go ahead, Councillor Phobes.
So usually what happens with me after we're done here, I come out, I'll sit at home and have a few more ideas. So can I email those if they are pertinent to CAO Hogan for, well, of course, council as well, but
Absolutely.
just
Yep.
in case, 'cause that's how my
Yeah.
brain works.
Well, this is a really big thing. It's a big, yeah, it really is. And so there will be lots of questions and a lot of pondering that will go with the theories of how to apply things. Councillor Penner.
In saying that, I do honestly want to thank you for what you brought forward here. Like you brought us 5-year summary here of what you've done here, and I really appreciate what you've done.
It is outstanding information. Thank you. Okay, any other discussion? So the motion reads that the Committee of Whole recommend that the Water and Wastewater Review come back to a future Committee of the Whole meeting for further discussion. Committee of the Whole, yeah, not community, yes. There we go. Thank you.
We are community.
Go ahead, Reeve King.
No, I just wanted to say the same as Councillor Penner. The work that's here is very much appreciated. There's a lot more work in front of us, but this gives us a good start. So thank you for those efforts. Very much appreciated.
Yes, it's a lot of information, so we can have a head start on the pondering of our choices. I appreciate that. Okay, so the motion is as it's on the screen. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimous. I would like to call a 15-minute break, so see everyone back here at 9:46, please. Okay, guys, we're going to call the meeting back in. Okay, I'd like to call us back in order for our meeting, and we are going to take a look at our agenda at 2.2, the Bylaw 1905 Draft Municipal Development Plan for further discussion. Barb Hazelton, when you are ready, we are.
Good morning, Council. So we are coming back for further discussion on the Municipal Development Plan. So again, as you guys are aware, this is our long-term document. We've been long-term in creating and long-term in future look as well. So this draft has been circulated since October 2024, and Council changes to the draft were formally presented at the required public hearing that was held on November 26, 2024. In order to provide Council with an opportunity for further discussion following the public hearing, administration has brought the draft back to this committee of the whole meeting to see whether Council would like to make any further amendments prior to third reading. If you do, we will make those adjustments, and we are proposing to bring a final draft, if we are there, back to the March 11th. However, if you need longer, then we can certainly accommodate that. So that's, if you want to go through, we're still using the red letter version. However, when we bring it back for third reading, you will have a clean copy with any changes that you have requested.
Thank you. Question for the presenter, Councillor Phillips?
Page 101, under natural resources, will there be mention of the aggregate levy in the MDP, or is that something that we do? Because I'm new to this, I'm just asking.
Go ahead, Mr. Hogan.
Through the chair, that's not something we generally mention in a municipal development plan.
Thank you. Good clarity? Sure, go ahead.
On page 102, under abandonment and reclamation of water wells, the ASB has a program that helps to meet the needs of this. Would there be a reason why we wouldn't include this in the MDP?
Sure. The reason is that is a government-funded program typically, and so it may not be there, so we don't want to put it into our document if for some reason the government chooses not to fund that program over a year.
Great. Sure, go ahead.
On page 104, the county will continue to supply educational material for landowners looking to lease their lands for commercial energy projects. There's no mention, and I believe we've discussed this before, that pamphlets being handed out to both sides, not just one or the other.
I believe pamphlets for both sides have been developed, right, and printed. Any further comment to that? Mr. Hazelton?
That's my apology. So we've had several people working on this because we lost the admin, and we just noticed this morning too that the maps that are in the one that was recently done are not the exact maps that we have proposed as the square ones for the CFO. And so I will make sure it is fixed in the version we had at the public hearing. But I think when we did these final revisions, a different one was pulled by someone that was doing it. So I will make sure that that gets added in there. We will go through it with a fine-tooth comb before we bring it back, so. Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Phillips.
And then I guess my last one, on page 115, when you're doing definitions, there was no definition for the ASB, and there is mention of it in this document.
Okay.
That's a good point. Yep. Reeve King?
Yeah, that probably in your acronyms anyway
Yeah.
should be there. And I had a question on, since Councillor Phobes mentioned definitions, we talk about aggregate resources, we talk about natural resources, and we talk about utilization of resources in our document. We talk about resource extraction, we talk about aggregate resources and other things like that. And I'm just wondering if in our definition, we need a definition for what resources we're referring to. Because I think we're talking about sand, gravel, oil and gas, wind, solar. So if we're gonna use that word resources to discuss all of those potential resources, I can't think of another word, we should probably have some kind of definition that explains what we're talking about when we talk about resource extraction. And we say things like the county may require a developer of resource extraction to enter into a development agreement. So what are those resources, I guess? And is there a difference between a natural resource extraction industry and an aggregate resource extraction? And just, anyway, it wasn't clear to me.
Okay.
And I thought there was room for interpretation where someone might be able to say, well, because if this is wind, it's not a resource, or because this is. So anyway, I just thought maybe we left some wiggle room. And so I just wanted to
Okay, we can,
suggest we have a look at that.
okay, we can aim to clarify that.
Great. Any other comments or suggestions? Councillor Cunningham.
So I appreciate Councillor Fobb's question on that education, because I was sure that it was in one of the documents I saw, so I was just a little confused when it wasn't in there. So just want to make sure I'm looking at the current one. So just under the alternative energy, which I did have comments from a few people, they really appreciated the change from renewables to alternative energy. But just wanting a little bit more conversation around number one objective, to facilitate the timely and economic development of alternative energy resources. Just what would be our reasoning for putting the word timely in there? And then I guess what would be our definition of economic development in the alternative energy resources?
Good questions. Do we have some clarity right now about what concept is?
Give me 1 second here, I just have to
Sure.
find my page. So I think we could remove timely if that's a concern, because again, it's not our process, so the timeliness is not something we have control over. And then I just think this is something that had been in there because there is an economic piece to that renewable energy side. They are developers that come in with a development opportunity. So again, it's up to council if you want to leave that in there, amend that out.
Any comments on that point? I like that it's there because I think it is part of development. And any other thoughts, comments? Councillor Cunningham?
Yeah, I do appreciate the timing, because I think, you know, planning department goes on timelines regardless of whatever development or permitting it is. So, yeah, I would be highly in favor of taking out the word timely on that.
Okay.
Okay, we've had a few suggestions of some changes. So far, I'm going to assume that everyone thinks those are good changes unless I hear from you otherwise. Any other thoughts? Councillor Fobbs.
So I'm not sure which one I'm looking at, but the hierarchy of plans process, you have the intermunicipal development plans still in there. Is that going to remain in this document, or are we removing it?
It will remain as part of the hierarchy. Yeah.
Because we will be referring to this particular plan then in that. Yeah. Yep, just, yep. It's very good. Any other thoughts? We have spent a lot of time on it. Maybe we've exhausted all our thoughts, concerns. Reeve King, what, do you have something more to add to our conversation?
Sure, why not muddy the waters? So, I'm gonna throw this CFO thing into the mix here because I think that we still haven't really come to a determination. And I know that there's still differences of opinion within the council. And so, I guess I'm putting it out there. I know that, yeah, it's page 84, yep. So currently what we're proposing, and just make sure I get this right. So we're having a 1 mile around a hamlet or any urban, or in the case of an urban, we're allowing, if the IDP boundary is greater than 1 mile, we're allowing that to be our boundary. I'm correct in that.
Correct, and I would clarify, there is no IDP that exceeds a mile. So to keep it clean and clear in the document, we're doing a mile and we are squaring the corners. So what you would see is the mapping that we gave you, it's going to be the squared version, so that if a quarter's touched, because otherwise the lines are invisible, if a quarter's touched, it is included. So right now, the way this is proposed is 1 mile from an urban, and I would leave the IDP wording out of it, and the reason would be is it just makes it muddy. And if the IDP changes, like I think what you need to do is set a hard line. Wherever that line is, wherever you guys choose to make that line, let's set a hard line that is not necessarily related to that IDP boundary, because if that changes, it impacts that line. If the urban changes, so if they annex a portion, it automatically will follow where that urban is, and that line just stays, whether you choose a mile or something greater. For clarity for everyone, I think it's better if you just define where you want that line. Whether it's a mile and a half, 2 miles, whatever it is you want to make it. And we will draw the maps accordingly, and that will become the exclusion zones.
So could you, for clarification for me, on 12.3, just tell me exactly the wording you're saying then?
So that wording would change, and we would just reflect whatever it is you guys want as that setback, that exclusion zone. So right now, that wording, I think, has confused people, because it's saying if the IDP is greater than a mile, then that IDP boundary would be where that exclusion zone is. However, none of the IDPs are greater than a mile, so it just makes it muddy. So when we actually drafted this, and this is out of the most recent, this gives you an idea, these maps of that squared, whatever is green is what you have worded as your current exclusion zone. If you want something different than that, you'll just need to make me aware.
Mr. Hogan,
So
I see you, Jerry, I'll get to you.
through you, Madam Chair, so what you'd really be looking at under that 12.3, based on what Ms. Hazelton has said, is that first sentence, within an IDP boundary of an urban or 1.6 kilometers, brackets 1 mile, of the urban boundary, whichever is greater, you would see that sentence taken out and essentially be replaced with wording that just reflected within 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile of an urban boundary.
Thank you, and that's what I was looking for. I appreciate that. Councillor Woodstock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we were to stay silent on an exclusion zone completely, AOPA rules would apply? Am I correct in that assumption?
Through the chair, that would be correct.
So using AOPA rules, there could be the possibility of probably not a feedlot or a hog operation, but, possible feathers, depending on the size of the operation, that could be closer than the 1 mile? Just a question.
That's very difficult to answer because it depends on the numbers that they're coming in with and that livestock type. So they could feasibly start with a smaller operation within that mile and expand it then within that mile. So it really depends, and I'm not trying to fudge, but every single one is different because of the numbers and the livestock type and what they're proposing. So if it's a sow fair to finish, they would have a fairly high minimum distance separation versus a sow farrow to wean, because then they're not raising the hogs for finishing weights, they're going out as weaners, so they're all different. And I'm not trying to muddy it, but it is muddy.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand that answer, Bart, because I know it is. I mean, I don't really want to put a OPA in charge of where, intensive livestock operations can be cited within the county, but that is an option. But then, like you say, it's hit and miss. It depends on what the operation is, the size of the operation, and how they forecast to mitigate some of the issues. So I would be in favor of the 1 mile from the corporate boundaries, but again, I just needed to ask whether AOPA rules would apply if we were silent on the exclusion zones. So thank you very much for your answer. I do appreciate that.
Go ahead.
And I will clarify as well through the chair that AOPA rules still apply, whether we create that exclusion zone or not. The operation is still bound to go through that process and still get their approval through that process. It just would basically say, if you're looking at something in our area that we have designated, and whether we're doing it both new and expansion to existing, we need to have that conversation as well. Then they will consider those things, and if it is contrary to our MDP, then they would deny it. The board could still hear it, and the board can still overturn based on, they're less likely if you have reasonable exclusion zones, but the board is not bound by our municipal development plan the way an approval officer is. So there is still that appeal opportunity if somebody was not satisfied with our rules. But either way, they're still going through that process. They would just be limited outside of that area.
Councillor Penner?
Thank you for that, and I hear what you're saying. Being good neighbours, we definitely have to put in that 1 mile. AOPA may overrule us, but I can't see it happening, but it does depend on the intensive livestock operation. So for me, for sure, it's got to happen.
Councillor Cunningham?
Yeah, actually, it was interesting because I did do a little research of other municipalities, and it's interesting that some of them do defer just to AOPA and take that out of the municipality's hands. But so I just want to clarify, when we did the ratepayer engagements in Acme and in Horseshoe, there's been some people wondering if there was urban folks that were involved in that. And my understanding is we 100%, it was Kneehill County residents and ratepayers, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So just to clarify for me, are we able to pull up for existing confined feeding operations what the results of those engagements were from our Kneehill County residents and ratepayers?
Yeah, it's okay.
2 seconds, I'm just pulling it up here.
Mr. Gannon?
Thank you through the chair. My recommendation is if you'd like to get that information, that we take a small recess so we can gather that information.
I've got it.
Okay,
If she wants to flip over, I'm just.
I stand corrected.
Okay, that's just fine, but thanks for the thought.
Just zooming to the right slide.
We, we could move on to other questions and come back to it as well, Barb, which would be more comfortable.
Carolyn, if you want to flip it over to me. Sorry.
Lease control.
So, this was the results for new. Actually, I'll give you the exact numbers, and I'll put this up here. That helps.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, so just that's good clarification for me. So if I'm understanding it correctly, 44.93% of Kneehill County residents and ratepayers wanted it to stay as it currently is in the MDP. And 15.94% want it changed to the proposed.
Okay, and this is for new. So we had another question for existing, which I will go to.
Okay.
If you guys
This is
are
for new, okay.
good with this one.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to make any comments on the slide before we change it?
Oh,
No, go ahead.
okay. And now for existing, these would be the numbers for existing.
Okay. So,
Jerry.
yeah, sure, we'll get Counselor Woodstock first, thanks.
I have difficulty reading that slide, so if somebody could please, give me the numbers.
Okay, it's 40.58% for the existing within 1 mile, 12.32% for 1 mile from an urban, 7.97 for no existing within the IDP area, which is just the plan area itself, and then 39.13 for AOPA is sufficient. So these are the numbers for existing. I can also give you the numbers for new. That was 44.93% for a new one within 1 mile from the IDP boundary, 15.94% for 1 mile from an urban or hamlet, 9.42 was no new within the IDP area itself, and then 29.71 AOPA is sufficient.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, my question then to you is, when AOPA is sufficient, we're talking how they ruled currently. So if we took that solely as the definition, that would mean then we will be leaving that to be changed according to them, with us not doing anything unless we reopened this plan, correct?
Correct.
So currently, in today's world, AOPA's ruling right now is similar to which one of those other options?
AOPA is sufficient would be, basically you are just going through that process without, you're relying on what they come up with for the minimum distance separation and their rules. Again, there are 4 categories when we are talking about minimum distance. So the first category would be distance to a single family dwelling. And then that goes up to category 4, which is distance to an urban. As soon as you get into category 3 and 4, category 3 is more country residential. It's a more dense populated area. That minimum distance does increase. But again, I can't tell you what it is because I don't know, depending on livestock type and number. I will tell you cattle, hog, and dairy all have a greater minimum distance separation. But that doesn't mean they can't come in as a smaller operation and then expand. So that's why we need to answer the new and expansion of existing question and where you want that boundary.
Great. So this is, and just for more conversation, these slides give us one piece of the information. There's other factors that we have to consider as a council, and for me, it's economic development for our current people, because we do know that the best way to be economically sustainable is by supporting our current businesses. And so that is weighing heavily on us as well, just so people are clear that this isn't going to be the defining piece of information. It's a huge piece of the information. And there's many, many other pieces, but I just for clarity. Reeve King. Oh, Councillor Phobes.
So here's my comment on this whole thing. When I assumed that we're just talking about our urbans and our hamlets were involved, I was in one kind of place. But now that our hamlets are involved, and I recognize that, when I look at the results of the survey, the new was 45 said 1 mile from the exit. Leave it as it is. 55% of the people had a different opinion than that. And if our IDP and 1 mile from the urbans are approximately the same, 55% of the people said either 1 mile from the urban, not to exist within that 1 mile, or AOPA is sufficient on new. On the existing, 60% said 1 mile from an urban, no existing within an IUP, which is no greater than that mile anyway, and AOPA is sufficient. So although we had the largest opinion that said, in that one category said, stay with the IDP plus a mile, if you accumulate the rest of the opinion, that is actually the majority. So when I look at that, I go, if the IDP boundary is no greater than a mile, and the majority of the opinion seems to weigh on that side of things, then I'm pretty happy with that. And even though I recognize that we still are restricting the ability of our own ratepayers to do development. And when I consider the conversations that we've had with some of our urbans and recognize that some of the fears that they had regarding development immediately against their boundary, we're not allowing that. And that's part of what I've been hearing is the concern is, well, you're going to allow a development right against the urban boundary. And the answer is no, we cannot. And no, AOPA would not. So I think in terms of a compromise, for us to still maintain an exclusion zone of a mile around any urban boundary and a mile around any hamlet existing in Kneehill County, I think that's a compromise that keeps AOPA on the table, but in a less impactful way, right? They're still going to make rulings looking at AOPA, but they're also going to make, the first consideration will be what's in our MDP. And so, to me, it's a reasonable compromise, and we're not going to make everybody happy. So that's my comment.
Councillor Phobes, do you still want me to come back to you, or?
I just don't know if my thing is more of a closed session, because
Okay.
something I observed. I don't know if we should publicly have that
Okay.
conversation. Or
Yeah.
we should
Then just request a
Yeah,
closed session.
I'm good with the
I would
movement.
request closed session, please.
Okay, we have a,
Make the motion.
yes. We have a motion to go into closed session. Any comments to that? All those in favor? We are enclosed. We're prepared a bit faster than 10 minutes, so I'll call it back to order. And we'll get back to our discussion around our bylaw in 1905. Any further comments that we... Councillor Penner.
I just want to let everybody know a comment that I had heard from a resident in a hamlet, and they thanked me for identifying the hamlets the same way as we do our urban municipality neighbors. They are still a group of homes like urban, so they did thank me for identifying or how we class them the same in something like this.
That's good to hear. Any other discussion, thoughts, or if not, motion? We've made a few suggestions of what we'd like to see changed. Maybe if just for our review, since we took our break, would you mind just reviewing what you're going to be bringing forward that we've discussed today that's a bit different than what we see in front of us?
I can certainly do that. So there was a comment on the renewables where we did have a policy in there, but obviously it was in a different version. So we will make sure that we are recognizing that we will continue to provide information to both landowners adjacent to renewable activity as well as landowners that are leasing their lands for renewable activity. So we will make sure we recapture that. There were some ASB clarification in the definitions, and then also some clarification regarding that natural resources extraction. What does that look like and what industries are considered in that? So we will make some clarifications there. And then this piece, wherever council lands, we will make sure that the wording is clear, and we will make sure the maps reflect whatever it is your wording is.
Okay, so that brings us back to we have to clarify how we want number 12 to read. Councillor Penner.
So 12.3, I would word it the same, similar to the hamlets, within the 1.601 mile of any urban boundary.
Thank you for that. Jerry, what do you think of this suggestion? And what would you have a different suggestion?
No, I would agree with the 1 mile outside of the corporate urban boundary. To keep that as one of the concessions to make sure that there is no IO or livestock operation that would be permitted. EOPA rules were being used. I mean, right now, when I look at the maps, and I don't want to be specific on which towns, but you know, they have a sphere of influence, roughly 8 sections around their boundaries that are basically exclusion areas for any sort of feedlot hog operation. And if we set that boundary, that would also exclude any feathers. And as feathers, I would say chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, whatever you want to call it, but it's the feather side. So I would be in support of that 1 mile boundary. And we start making the boundaries larger than that. It could go to multiple sections if we're going to use IDPs, and I don't believe that that is something that we should be putting against our residents. I think our residents should have the opportunity to develop into the future. There's new ways of doing things. There's all sorts of new things coming forward in the ag industry to tell generations, future generations of some of these proposed feedlots or agricultural operations, to tell them that they are no longer able to expand, that they will have to either move their operation, which is, I mean, it doesn't work. Okay, I'm dragging you out way too long. I'm in support of the 1 mile. boundaries of the towns and villages.
Thank you for the conversation. Councillor Cunningham, can I call on you to have your input on what you would like to see worded there?
So I own a business myself, so I'm always going to be pro-business, and I never want to, purposely limit the ability of our residents to do things. The hard part for me is there's two sides to this. Yes, by limiting the boundaries, we are limiting, like they say, generational families of the ability to expand. I have heard from people, not only in the Acme area, but in another area. There's a flip side to that. So people have plans, future plans for their land in those areas as well, and they feel the expansion of this boundary will limit their ability, and they are our ratepayers as well. So, I mean, it's been said multiple times. I mean, this is a hugely difficult decision to make because, as Reeve King said, somebody's going to not be happy regardless of this. So, I'm actually not prepared today to make that decision. I need a little bit more time to discern this one.
Okay. Councillor Christie, could you share your thoughts on what you want for wording here?
I'm in favor of the 1 mile from the urban boundary. And part of that is because when we negotiated the IDPs back in the day, we didn't realize that the planning documents overrode some of that. All the urbans agreed with that IDP originally till they saw our development plans. So that's, for me, it's controversial no matter what we do, but generational farms are important to me. So if you want to bring our families back, we have to leave them the option to grow.
Thank you.
The other part is as technology changes, we have to accommodate that too.
Exactly. Yeah. Councillor Phobes.
I struggle with this one, especially because I can't even formulate the words right now. There's a lot of moving parts here, things that I've seen in the open houses that we've had, the conversations that I've had with people on both sides as well, like producers and urbans as well. I mean, if AOPA is the ruling body that's going to determine what we can and cannot do regardless of what we put into this, why would we even entertain putting in a mile? I fully understand why. It's been explained to me in thorough, thank you, Mr. King, I do appreciate that, of why you would do this, and I understand the things, but there is an awful lot of stuff that is being weighed here, whether it's the urban neighbors, the people that are in our residence, the producers that are here. I'm in the same, I don't want to stall this anymore, but I'm struggling with why would we take out something or put something in if the hierarchy is this?
I appreciate your comments. Thank you. And Reeve King, could you give us your position, please?
So I guess the reality is that we do represent all the landowners in Kneehill County. And regardless of what one neighbor decides to do with his property, it always impacts his other neighbors. And by allowing one type of development does not necessarily limit some other type of development, but it might make it harder. And so how do you balance that? And as I said earlier, you can never make everybody completely happy. So the question becomes, for me anyway, is as I think about that 1 mile boundary, we have given a lot more influence to our urbans than maybe I would like to give. However, I also recognize that we are not giving them as much influence as they would like. And so, again, it's a balance. What do we do? And I guess maybe do the least harm. Maybe that's the way to put it. How can we do the least harm? And yep, we're going to restrict some of our own ratepayers. And the impression from maybe some of our urbans is we're restricting them. But at this point in time, other than one situation, I can't think of any development that's being proposed that may or may not be impacted by this boundary. And so we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We're just guessing at this point in time. And we've agreed, no matter what happens, we're going to have a conversation about it with our urbans and with all the other people who are going to be impacted by that. And that's whether it's wind, solar, feedlot, hog barn, chickens, whether it's a big warehouse or a commercial development of some kind that where they're going to do processing and who knows what. In all cases, we have rules around how those things happen and who gets talked to. So for me, yep, it's hard, but I'm happy. If we go with that, I can live with that.
Go with which?
The 1 mile.
The 1 mile. Thank you.
1.6 kilometers, 1.62 something, 1 mile.
I'd have to say that's where I land as well. I think the 1 mile is a kindness, but I also appreciate that those urban areas do serve our residents, and we also enjoy, you know, taking our kids to the playground and enjoying the beauty of an urban. I think that's nice to appreciate them for that. So yes, for me, it's the 1 mile. So now where do we want to go? Do we want to vote, or we want to say the majority said 1 mile and go with it as a consensus? What would you like as a process, council?
I think we have a consensus, don't we?
No, we have two who said no.
We have a consensus.
I guess we have to give administration some direction if they're to bring it, hoping to bring it back on the 11th, even though it doesn't have to be finalized that day. It was made very clear to us. But I think we should give some direction to you today.
Okay. Councillor Cunningham.
Sorry, I'm going to backtrack here a little bit. Can I ask a couple questions? Am I still remembering?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we know how many confined feeding operations have been denied an expansion or a new permit due to the to what we have currently in place in our MDP?
That would be one.
And then just another question, just because, again, and I hate to use this when I'm almost done my term, but there is a little bit of catch up because I wasn't sitting at this seat when the MDP was last done. So I guess just for the people that were sitting here, I guess I'm just curious to know, and I guess I'm asking you to sell me on it, what has changed since the MDP was done last time that makes you want to have this change? If what I'm hearing is there's one CFO that was denied, what is the driving force to changing it? Is it strictly the economic development potential of those CFOs currently, or like I'm just looking for some clarity on that?
Councillor Woodstock.
The answer to your question, Councillor Cunningham, would be is that the IDPs were down since that MDP was first put forward. And the wording in that MDP actually brought IDPs into the exclusion zone, and that was never an intent. We never had an IDP with, we had one IDP, and that was with the town of Three Hills. There was no IDPs with any of the other municipalities, urbans within our boundaries, and we were forced to do that through government involvement. Where government said we need to do IDPs, so we did IDPs without understanding how that was going to affect our landowners. So, you know what has changed? The IDP.
Does that clarify it? Do you need more explanation? Councillor King, Reeve King, geez, sorry.
I'll jump in on this one too. And I think for me, it's just lack of awareness for me personally as to what the impact would be of the formulation of those IDPs. So when I was sitting at this table as a councillor and in negotiation with our urbans around IDPs and IDP boundaries, I'm not even going to blame the rate of speed or anything that we had to do them at. I'm just going to say I was unaware of the consequence of that IDP. Had I been aware that that was a consequence, the negotiation on that IDP would have been very, very different than what happened at the time. And so because of lack of awareness and not understanding the consequence of putting those IDPs in the way that we formulated them, and not realizing the language in the MDP, the result is where we are today. And so that's my reason.
Yeah, and just to expand on both of you, when we had to end the current MDP, prior to the IDPs being made, there was an intent there. The intent was the 1 mile. When the IDP was written, we still believed that intent was intact. It wasn't until someone looked to expand did we understand how it would be interpreted by the NRCB, sorry. Getting all my acronyms, and so that was totally unintended. That is not at all what we expected the ruling to be, and therefore we're correcting the wording to match our actual, always original intent for what we wanted for our communities. Councillor Phobes.
Okay, so that being said, I guess I come back to the portion of is when this IDP was created, you guys held a public hearing and no one came forward, as I've been told, during that public hearing that they would have an issue with this.
Because they were told that it would be still as it was intended, the 1 mile. It wasn't until after that process and the IDP was put forward that we found out that the NRCB would rule as they did. That was never our intent. So no one in that public hearing would have known that that would have happened either until there was an example to show that they interpreted our documents different than we intended our documents to be and different than we educated all those people at the public hearing for. Anything else to add? Does that help you, Councillor Cunningham? Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one minor clarification, I think, to what has been said. The education and the communication around the IDP never actually specifically touched on the CFO issue. It touched on a number of things, but not that one, because that wasn't apparent to anybody, the public, the producers, ourselves, that impact existed. So there was it wasn't understood by administration, by council, by the public, by the CFO producers, that actually was creating a change. And it wasn't talked about then as the intent. The intent to create a change was never something that entered the dialogue.
Right, and this was looked at numerous times, and that was just not known until NRCB took hold of that. Go ahead, Ms.
I just want to clarify a bit of the history. So the legislation was amended to give municipalities an opportunity to use the municipal development plan as a tool to create an exclusion zone, a reasonable exclusion zone. So that wording went into our municipal development plan around 2005. Don't quote me 100%, but it was there a long time and just kept being carried forward because we didn't have any intermunicipal development plans, with the exception of the one with Three Hills that came quite a few years later. But so again, it was just some wording that stayed in there. And then when we were required to put IDPs in place, all of a sudden, those lines in the municipal development plan became important. And so, but as far as the NRCB, they always would look at our municipal development plan from the time that legislation was amended. They always had that in their sights, and as long as the application was consistent with the municipal development plan, which prior to the IDPs they would have been because nobody was within that mile, so they would have been consistent with our municipal development plan. But as soon as that IDP came into place, that did create a bit of a challenge in one case because they were no longer consistent with the municipal development plan. So again, it was wording that got incorporated. Very likely similar wording is in most municipal development plans,
and of the day anyway. And it just got carried in, so that's kind of historically what happened.
Any further questions on how that happened? And go ahead, Councillor Phillips.
So I guess once you realize, and I don't know who's gonna answer this question, it's just me in my head. So once you realize that this became an issue, why did we wait so long to do it and not do it sooner? To amend it to help the people that this is affecting?
How I remember it is we as a council decided if we're gonna, because you have to formally open the municipal development plan, let's do a thorough job. That's why we had then our working groups, and we took on the entire big task too in a big way, which made for a longer process. But that is what started that entire long process, was that awareness. Mr. Hogan, do you have anything to add to how I explained that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think the only nuance that I touch is the municipal development plan really was due for an update. And so to say that this is the one thing that triggered that, I don't know that that's completely accurate, but it is definitely a part of, the plan was overdue for a review. So putting the whole process in play. One thing I would need to go back and is to check the actual timeline between when that decision was made by the NRCB versus when our process occurred. I don't actually think there was a large gap of time in between those two events.
Right. And we, like you said, we had already been saying that this is something we need to update. The thought process of getting this started was already there.
Yeah.
But when that happened, it became clear we had to get. But we didn't want to let go of the process of our task force, is that what we called them? Our 5
Working groups.
Working
Yeah.
groups, our working groups, and all of that process we wanted to stick with.
Yeah, so I'll defer to Ms. Hazelton on this one, but I believe that the idea that we would be reviewing the municipal development plan, or the proposal that we'd be doing that, actually preceded that application for the feedlot expansion. So that was, that process was already, I'm not going to say it had started by that point. I'd have to go back and look at the actual timing, but the idea that we would be doing this was already in place prior to that NRCB decision.
Right, because we had other factors, like the renewables that we were also talking about. There was several factors that we as a council knew we wanted to look at this document. Anyone else has anything else to add to this part of the conversation? Anything new to add to the conversation? Councillor Phobes.
When was this document last reviewed by council as a whole?
Long time ago.
I'm going to have to pull the dates exactly. I know we did a couple minor amendments, but I think before 2016 maybe-ish, around there.
Yeah. If I recall, it was during my first term. That we did, that's what I'm saying, that we did the first few amendments, those little few amendments. And in that time, when that was happening, we did have a conversation. You guys as administration did warn us that this is going to be needing a bigger overhaul, and that we need to be looking at that coming down the road. So we already had, I remember at that time when we made those small amendments, the conversation was it won't be long before we have to look at it in a greater way. So we've been preparing for quite some time. So we are stuck still on number 12.
No, we're not.
Okay, Councillor King.
I'm prepared to make a motion that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that the draft municipal development plan be brought back with the following amendment. So under, I'm going to get all these right, Section 4, policies related to agriculture. So, and then the policies under agriculture, 12.3, that it read within 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile of an urban boundary. No, because we're not in agreement 100% on this particular clause, we have to vote on this one. We were in agreement on the other ones.
Go ahead, Mrs. Hazelton.
I just want to clarify, we're going to use the squared maps, correct? 1 mile squared, so,
As you had suggested earlier.
okay. And then this is for both new and expansion to existing. Okay,
Because 12 says no new or expansion.
right.
So 12.3 should read just like 12.2. Instead of referring to hamlets, it refers to urban.
12.
Pardon me?
12,
Policies under agriculture, or is 12.3? It's the agriculture section that you're looking for.
So, and just to be clear,
She's still working on it. Just wait.
and for clarity, Reeve King, you are suggesting that the second sentence that's in that number 3 already, where a portion of the quarter falls within the mile zone, the entire quarter be included?
No, yes, yep.
Okay, so we're just changing the
Yeah,
first
we're just-
sentence, not the second.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone understands the motion? Any questions on the motion or comments?
Do you think we need to include that where a portion of a quarter falls in this motion? Because that's part of that point as well. I guess all the clarity needs to be is that we are setting the boundary at 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile, and that the rest of that clause, where it says where a portion of a quarter falls within the mile exclusion zone, the entire quarter has been included in the exclusion zone, would stay in there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Ollie.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think what we can do, and we'll just work on this in the motion, is that we just indicate it's the first sentence of that that's changing. So if we take, if you give me 30 seconds, Carolyn and I can draft that. Then the motion saying the first sentence is changing, but the rest of it remains, right? Because we're not changing the wording beyond the first sentence, is our understanding.
Okay,
That's correct.
so do you want to see that on the screen before we vote? Okay. Do you have presenters at 11, so we will get this piece out of the way and then we'll have our presenters come forward. Thanks for being patient with us.
Well, we can just postpone that till we come back.
Okay,
Just take a
we've had a request for a 2-minute break and we will skip the motion and go straight to our presenters and we'll come back to the motion after our I assume we're online and all's good? Yep, very good. So we are moving on just because we have a scheduled time to have some presentations done to it for us from some guests. I will let Wendy Gerbrandt go into introducing them when it's time and give us our go ahead, presentation, sorry, losing my words here.
So good morning, Council. So I'm back here today just to go through, and we'll be introducing GGA and Associates here shortly on the Horseshoe Canyon Feasibility Study. So just on the background, on December 12th, Council, throughout the budget process, approved a budget of up to $110,000 to obtain third-party services to conduct a feasibility study and concept design for an interpretive center at the Horseshoe Canyon. In March 2024, administration successfully leveraged a grant from the Small Community Opportunity Fund for $32,000, and in September 2024 procured GGA and Associates to develop the 3 concept designs and the feasibility study. On December 12th, Council participated in a visioning session facilitated by GGA and Associates, and the goal of the visioning session was to better understand Council's vision for the site, which would inform the design and financial analysis of an interpretive center at Horseshoe Canyon. GGA led a discussion with Council on the long-term goals, tourism, local culture, and other key topics to help inform 3 conceptual outcomes and that financial feasibility study. The concept designs and feasibility will provide Council with preliminary information to guide future direction and decision-making of an interpretive center at Horseshoe Canyon. So GGA and Associates is here today to present to Council the What We Heard report for your review and to provide feedback to administration and GGA. This step is essential to ensure the report accurately reflects the insights and direction provided by Council during the December 12th visioning session. Upon completion of the discussion, the necessary amendments will be made and shared with the project team to pursue the next steps in developing the financial model and concept designs. Additionally, GGA will provide Council with a project status update outlining progress to date and what to expect in the coming phases, including an overview of what Council can expect from the 3 concept designs and financial model. So I will turn the table now over to Steph and Abir with GGA, and they're going to go through the What We Heard report and those next steps. So I'll just move this.
So before you start into your presentation, do you mind just introducing yourself and your colleague and your company, please?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you to Council for having us back here today, and thank you, Wendy, for the introduction. My name is Stephanie Young, and I'm joined here by Abir Birani. I'm a partner with GGA Architecture, where we are developing the feasibility study and concept design for the Interpretive Center project at Horseshoe Canyon. So today I am here to present the results from the visioning session. We hosted with Council on December the 12th, as Wendy had mentioned, which is the first phase of our feasibility study exercise. Our intention with this document is to present what we heard as a recording of the session and to ensure that we have captured the direction from Council. Try page down there. In our visioning session, we presented results from our desktop study of existing documentation, as well as along with relevant precedents, project objectives, and financial considerations. We also engaged in 2 interactive activities, a Dotmocracy, where Council members voted on images that resonated with their objectives, and a SWOT, S-W-O-T, analysis of the Horseshoe Canyon site. In our discussion, we identified key questions and asked Council to provide their commentary. The questions that we presented are as follows, along with the feedback. So the first one was, what makes Kneehill County unique? We heard a resounding kind of consensus that it was really about a sense of community, where residents felt a deep connection to the area and are proud to live in Kneehill County. Entrepreneurship and innovation are incredibly important. There's a very strong entrepreneurial and business spirit that lives amongst the population, and everyone's willing to take risks on new opportunities across different sectors. Another unique factor is the proximity to urban areas. And so while Kneehill County has that quieter lifestyle, it's also very proximal to larger centers such as Calgary, to the airport, Red Deer and Drumheller, and that provides many opportunities as well. There is a unique landscape at Kneehill County, especially at Horseshoe Canyon, and the natural features with the canyons and the valleys are an asset that could be better utilized for tourism and business development. And then also economic stability. The region is financially stable. It's supported by many diverse sectors, and that the residents of Kneehill County do show an interest in sustainable growth. The next question we asked were, what are the long-term goals for Horseshoe Canyon? We heard very strongly funding and sustainability, ensuring that we're avoiding taxpayer burden while still creating a sustainable facility that attracts visitors and supports the local economy. Enhancing tourism and community integration, the goal to make Horseshoe Canyon more than simply a stopover, and encouraging visitors to spend a little bit more time in the area and to really appreciate and enjoy the canyon along with the Interpretive Center and additional amenities. Infrastructure and commercial development, and providing an emphasis on creating functional and usable commercial spaces around the canyon, including potential partnerships for nearby businesses such as the adjacent campground or gas stations. There was also a goal for conservation and architecture. The development must respect the landscape by ensuring any intervention blends well into the environment and supports the goals of ecological preservation. And also for community involvement. Horseshoe Canyons should serve as a gathering space for the county's southeast kind of district and offer, if possible, recreational, educational, and functional spaces for both residents and tourists. The following question was around seasonality and should the site operate seasonally or year-round? There was much support for operating this facility year-round and supporting it with winter activities such as snowshoeing or winter camping. Also a provision for sustainable growth and interest in starting small and expanding as more visitors come and become used to Horseshoe Canyon, and with a focus on sustainable phase development. Looking to involve third parties, so seeking external investors and developers to fund and operate certain facilities, such as a glamping component or the Interpretive Center with the cafe, and to reduce reliance on taxpayer funding. Part of this also is to incorporate community and tourism integration, because residents strongly desire and support year-round community gatherings and events, so providing that opportunity for them. And then also considering the operational concerns with a seasonal operation. So being mindful of the challenges around long-term maintenance and funding and staffing, but also a possibility of providing more diverse revenue-generating activities. The next question was, what is the connection between Horseshoe Canyon and tourism? There was a lot of conversation around leveraging nearby attractions. Obviously, Horseshoe Canyon is quite proximal to both Drumheller and kind of the adjacent highways as well. So supporting the other attractions within the county. Providing revenue generation and creating business opportunities inside and outside the canyon. Developing a collaboration with urban centers and urban areas. Boosting tourism without directly competing. And creating a business ecosystem with the belief that business feeds business, meaning that one local business's success can drive another's success and keeping them integrated. And also investigating different revenue generating ideas, innovative ideas like the Friends of Horseshoe Canyon membership program or a pavilion that can generate income through diversified revenue streams. The last question we asked during this section was, what would an interpretive center mean to you, or a community center? And we broke it down, or we heard that it was broken down into 4 major areas, which is 1, being an economic catalyst, and hoping that the Interpretive Center can drive further economic development, focusing on a return on investment as well as community benefit. A balance of community and education. The ideal Interpretive Center would combine community spaces and flexible event areas and educational programming around local heritage and natural history. To encourage local engagement, provide spaces for markets for local artisans and event spaces for rental and retail space, as well as investigate public and private collaboration and developing an emphasis on creating a space that's not solely dependent on municipal funding, but having a preference for third-party investment and involvement in operating experiences. So we hope that those points were accurately captured based on the discussion that we had around the questions.
I have a comment on one of them. When you go back to what are the long-term goals for Horseshoe Canyon, your last one under community involvement, I think that's very close to what I think we were saying, but I would prefer if it was worded more like, our first sentence would word, Kneehill County residents would be offered recreational, educational, functional spaces for themselves and tourists, or somehow reword that so that it makes our county residents, whereas the way you have it worded, it sounds like it's about it being a gathering space for the southeast corner. I think there should be two separate sentences, is what I'm trying to say, and that would be the second component. That would be great there. It's just semantics, but I think it makes a difference on how the people would interpret what our intent is.
Right, no, thanks for that comment, Deputy Reeves. So something more along the lines of Kneehill County residents would be offered recreational, educational, functional spaces for residents and tourists, and then also serve as a gathering space for the county's southeast district.
I think that more accurately captures the vision priorities.
Perfect.
Any other comments or thoughts?
We'll make that change.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Impressed. You articulated as well. Well, what else do you have to say for us?
Well, we're hoping this is relatively straightforward because, again, it's a recording and really just a documentation of what was heard. It's really going to be that next phase, I think, which is going to be quite exciting. But coming out of that discussion, we've determined overall themes of really balancing community needs with sustainable economic growth, providing venues for tourism development, and also being able to leverage the canyon's unique attributes. At this point in the visioning session, we also illustrated different examples of interpretive facilities around the world to generate discussion. And we also discussed different conceptual funding models for consideration, which will be further developed in the next phase. And funding sources, capital costs, and operation and maintenance costs will be very much among our considerations. So during this visioning session, our next activity was titled Adoptmocracy. We presented numerous images to better understand the qualitative look and feel that Council desired for the Interpretive Center. And on the screen here are the images that generated the most response and positivity, where we had a lot of discussion around these particular images. And our key takeaways from the Adoptmocracy were around the look and feel of the space, but as well as the function of the space as well. Ensuring that the Interpretive Center has flexibility. The space should be able to serve a variety of purposes and cater to many different groups. To respect the natural environment, the design should connect with the natural environment and blend seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. We heard that very strongly. And adjacent to that is also to have a minimal environmental impact. Council preferring design with minimal environmental intervention, favoring natural elements over excessive construction. A design that also reflects local identity, reflecting Kneehill County's unique identity with a focus on local businesses, agriculture, and history. Providing amenities such as food service, like a cafe or alternative to enhance the visitor experience. And to recognize the openness to a phased development, understanding that with growth and with kind of future ambitions, a phased approach to the project allows for better budget management and future expansion based on ever-evolving community needs. The next activity we had was the SWOT, or SWOT, asset analysis of the site, standing for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And strengths are identified as internal factors that can contribute to project success. Weaknesses are, again, internal factors that can present a disadvantage. Opportunities are external factors that can be leveraged, and threats are external factors that could pose risks to the project. And so a few highlights include strengths of adjacencies to Highway 9 and its connectivity to tourism, adjacency to residents and the neighboring campground, and the Nature Conservancy of Canada ensuring the area remains authentic to its natural and cultural heritage. Some challenges include being cognizant of erosion issues, parking challenges, and any restrictive covenants and infrastructure restrictions that may limit development. Opportunities include tapping into the educational and access potential to catalyze new events, activities, and development. And finally, the proximity to Highway number 9 also needs to be considered carefully. While it's a strength, it can also be a bit of a threat, as we need to ensure that this new development doesn't create traffic congestion or present any overdevelopment risks. As we move forward, other considerations that came to light from our discussion was an emphasis on preserving the natural landscape and the potential for educational and architectural impacts to that as well. And so during our session, we heard a desire to develop a facility to suit 150 visitors. We believe there's an opportunity to support additional growth as well, which also was generated from our discussion. And depending on a phased approach, we will investigate that in our upcoming analysis for the 3 options and our market analysis as well. And so just highlighting a little bit more clearly in terms of next steps for us. It involves, for us, synthesizing the information we heard from the visioning session and the desktop studies, as well as additional desktop studies we've been doing kind of in the last few weeks. And we will be, and are currently generating a functional program of spaces based on that feedback to develop 3 options that will be analyzed against both capital costs as well as a market analysis of what we feel that the area can support. And so we had listed out 3 phases in our original RFP response. Discovery, phase 1, which we come to completion with the what we heard report as the final document for that phase. But really what we were trying to do through discovery was understand the project objectives very clearly from council, as well as understanding those desktop studies and recording and document that visioning session into a what we heard document. And as we mentioned, we're using that information to develop a functional program, which brings us then into phase 2, which is what we're calling the envision phase. And it's from that functional program that we'll be developing 3 versions of it, again, based off of that feedback. And through those 3 options, we can then go out and understand what high-level capital costs may be. We're using unit rate kind of understanding costing there so that we can get a budget envelope. And at the same time, we'll be testing it against a financial model for each option. So the market analysis, what can be supported in the area, what other facilities in the area are trending towards. And then from there, when we complete that phase, probably in around 4 weeks' time, we will present to council, and at that point, those 3 options, and hopefully identify a preferred option. After that, we enter our validate phase, which is to finalize any data review and costing modeling. This is what our team at Colliers will be focusing very much on. And from there, we develop more conceptual plans and conceptual renderings so that there is a marketing document or a bit of just a vision of what the facility could be without actually designing it. It's also the preparation of a final feasibility study and any further community engagement as directed by Kneehill County. And our last slide here is just an update in terms of schedule. We are tracking to complete this document sometime in April. We are, as I mentioned, in the middle of the envision stage, but waiting for hopefully an endorsement of the What We Heard report to be able to kind of really move on and complete our functional program. But from there, we will be working closely with the Colliers team to develop those market analyses and the costing as well, to then bring back to you those options and then complete the feasibility report for sometime mid to late April. And so that is all I had in my presentation today, and very happy to answer any questions. Like I said, thank you very much for having us here.
Thank you. Well done. We really appreciated our day with you as well, and gathering the vision and the conversation that came with it. It's very exciting. I have one other comment, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change the wording, but when under threats, you pointed out about Highway 9. I feel overdevelopment risks is just plain threat on its own, and that is very concerning to our residents. So I just wanted to emphasize that. That's not just based on the highway being there, it's also based on community preference.
Thanks, Deputy Reeve. I agree with you. I think we'll pull that out and make it its own bullet point. I think that makes sense.
I appreciate that. It just represents what our people are trying to say better, our residents are trying to say.
Yeah, understood.
Anyone else have any comments? Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks for coming to visit us again. I heard you mention the words community engagement. So this is either, would be a question for you or for my fellow council members. I'm just wondering, where do we begin to engage with our residents and our ratepayers on potentially their vision and concept for this proposed project?
Mr. Hogan?
Through Madam Chair, there's a question there for council, but this project is a result of engagement with the community that led to the development of the Horseshoe Canyon Master Plan. So the engagement through just the development of the plan itself, the focus group feedback that tied into the plan, is what indicated this project is something to move forward with. So if there is to be other engagement around this specific project, that'd be up to council. But this project came about as a result of a plan where engagement occurred.
Councillor Cunningham.
So just to confirm, that focus group was done in 2020?
I would, through you, Madam Chair, I'd have to go back and look at the exact time frame, but I think that's close.
I believe it was 20. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions? No. Reeve King.
So again, I think it's more for administration than perhaps for our presenters, but how do we see the process of the area structure plan sort of integrating with what we're doing here on the feasibility for the interpretive center, if we're going to call it that?
So through you, Madam Chair, I'll take an answer at that and then defer to Mr. Gannon if he has anything to add. This feasibility plan is for a specific building or component. So this is a very detailed. I'm going to go back to that word component. It's a tangible building. You're looking at the facility, you see it. The area structure plan is a broad planning document that would govern, that would anticipate or lead development within the area. So you wouldn't see the area structure plan necessarily indicate a specific building, but more so lay the groundwork for these types of uses could occur in this area, these types of uses would occur in this other area. Here's the servicing that would be required to provide services to those areas, which could include commercial, residential, all sorts of different types of uses. So the ASP is much more broad in scope as compared to this feasibility study, which is really about construction of a specific facility.
Go ahead.
So just as follow-up, and I think the reason I'm asking the question, it relates to what Deputy Reeve McGee said around the development and development pressure. The reality is as we develop the area structure plan, they'll be much more clear in terms of what development may or may not happen and what level of development pressure may or may not be around the canyon. So this particular facility that we're talking about is a singular entity, potentially, to happen at the current, I'm gonna call it reception area, parking area of Horseshoe Canyon. The area structure plan would be a much clearer picture of what the vision is for big development around Horseshoe Canyon. And so the comment around, I think, development pressure probably relates more to what the area structure plan might have to say than this one entity that's being proposed here. Mr. Hogan.
Mr. Hogan?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. So the area structure plan would look at your broad uses, where this is looking at, again, some broad use has been defined specific to the building by our presenters, but largely this would fall into an area possibly designated by the ASP for public use. The area structure plan is where I said before, is a much broader document. The area structure plan could incorporate a growth area that extends beyond the canyon for miles. And could address any number of potential uses, whether, as I said before, whether those are commercial, residential, maybe council wants to consider industrial in that area. Like I said, it depends on how large an area that you want to designate into that area structure plan, which will be in part aided, assisted by the growth study that we're also undertaking. So it is in large part that area structure plan that addresses, like you said, Reeve King, the development pressures, because the area structure plan will also indicate what services might be required to deal with those development pressures.
Well, and maybe for clarity for you, Reeve King, as under threats, when I said overdevelopment risk, I also, in that, for me, it also means anything developed that we have out of the suggestion fits the space, that it's not all of a sudden, you know, neon signs and overly vivacious. So I'm not sure if there's a different vocabulary than that, but that's more what I was targeting, is that it's not bigger than we need, it's not brilliant, more brilliant than we need, those types of I'm not good with the vocabulary. I'm sure you guys can figure that out. Mr. Gannon.
Thank you. Just through the chair for additional clarification, the Horseshoe Canyon Master Plan will be a consideration of the ASP. That's our recreational area, and that plan would be a consideration of that. So the facility is part of the master plan, which is a proposed item or commercial space, tourism space, however you may want to determine it. The location of where that would be proposed has yet to be determined. And that could be further determined in ASP should the design go that way and you'd like industry to be the provider of that. So you could create commercial districts, you can create residential districts and build that out depending on council's requirement. And that is done through urban planning specialists that will look at the market, the availability and those options to advise council of that at that time. So this plays into the Horseshoe Canyon Master Plan, but the ASP will be taking the considerations of that for that potential build out or that opportunity in the area structure plan for that area. I hope I clarified that for you.
Go ahead.
And I guess just from clarification on my part, I think when we suggest in our information that we provided to our presenters today that the development must respect the landscape and it must blend in, that eliminates the neon signs, that eliminates the bling, and that allows a facility that actually complements the site. And so that fear of the direction we've given really should substantially alleviate the fear of that kind of thing happening, because the direction is, it is to respect the environment and it is to blend into the situation and is to be respectful of the natural environment that's there. So that's why I felt that the fear of overdevelopment and what might actually end up happening in large part around the canyon and in that area has more to do with the area structure plan than this specific facility because of the direction that we've already given here. So what's the next steps?
Mr. Phobes?
I'm not sure who's gonna answer this question, but why the ASB? Because to me, this seems more like an AcDev than it does an Agricultural Service Board. Just curious.
Oh, you got the acronyms confused.
Oh.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. Yes, it's just a confusion of the acronyms. It's area structure plan versus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
As opposed to Ag Service Board?
Yeah, well, I thought he said ASB and I'm like, what? That's why I need to
Enunciation.
I do apologize. Could be my drawl.
Any other questions around this document?
What's the next steps from their point of view?
Okay.
So my question would be is, what do you want now? Like, what's the next steps from your point of view, and what are you asking of us as council? Are you basically looking for an endorsement that says, I think you heard what we said, and therefore you are free to proceed with your next step, which is the envision and validation kind of process? That's my question is, I think if we're saying, yep, you heard us, what's your next?
Yeah, we are looking for, yes, an endorsement of this document does accurately represent the information that we heard. Certainly, if there was any concern brought forward today, you know, we wouldn't want to have completed the envisioned phase without speaking to you and making sure that the document was accurate before proceeding. So, yeah, it's really an endorsement of this document so that we may proceed into the next phase.
Thank you. Ms. Gerbrandt, did you have something you wanted to add, or?
No, just
Nope.
that we have taken those additional comments and I've made some notes, so we'll just make some small minor amendments based on that discussion today.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. So, yes, we're really, really pleased with where we're at, and so we have a recommendation that we recommend to council to accept this as information, but if we have any other comments, I'm looking for any other conversation that might be needed.
So,
Councilor
yeah,
King.
I think that we just need a little bit of a clarification here. So this facility that we're talking about is at the head of the canyon where our existing parking lot, et cetera, is. And we had some conversation around location. And so it's basically going to be on Kneehill County property at the top of the canyon where the existing facilities are.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Good clarification, thank you. Yeah. I just want to be clear. No, that's important.
Good question.
And it's important to have out there, so I appreciate that. Okay, so Committee of the Whole, our recommendation is to recommend to council to accept as information. Would anyone like to make that motion? Or is there anything else we need to consider before we do?
No, go ahead.
Councilor Phobes.
So when we're looking at this site specific, I'd also like to make sure that we're including the other sites like Orkney up the way that bring people actually towards the county as well. I'd like to see that as part of the development in here as well. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, Mr. Hogan. I'm looking.
Madam Chair, just looking for, I guess, for some clarity on that statement from you, Councillor Phobes, because this feasibility study is only for this facility at Horseshoe Canyon.
I think I can provide some clarity, and it has to do with what is the connection between Horseshoe Canyon and tourism.
Okay.
And the first point is leveraging nearby attractions, where the goal is to encourage visitors to spend more time either in Drumheller or other attractions within the county. So we're using this center to draw focus to Kneehill County and other attractions within the county. So in the information that's provided would be, so that's the,
That's where it's
I
at.
think that's the connection that
Okay.
Councillor Phillips was looking for.
Thank you.
And it's in the document.
Yeah.
No, and thank you. I just wanted to ensure we understood that
Interpreted
nuance.
it all the same way.
Because, yeah, I think that is the intent and captured in there, is that this would act as a hub, or call it an educational resource or a tourism resource for the area. But nothing in this document will touch on facilities or design or anything related with the other sites. Okay.
Anything else? Or a motion? Councillor Penner.
Great discussion, everybody, and thank you for coming out again today. And I think you've heard us loud and clear that we want to promote the whole county, but this document is for down there. But as long as it's stated like it has been here, I would make the motion that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to accept the Horseshoe Canyon Interpretive Centre and feasibility report for information.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion to accept the Horseshoe Canyon Interpretive Center and feasibility report for information. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. It was great to see you again.
Okay. Thank you, Council, and thank you, Stephanie and Ibor.
Alrighty. So we're going to rejuggle back to item 2.2, the bylaw 1905, and we'll just give our staff people a moment to get set up for that topic again.
Right, well, that, I figured this isn't the second one, so I'm like.
Give me a nod when you're ready there, please.
We have 5 minutes.
Oh, right, thank you.
I need 5-minute recess.
I'm sorry, we just got a request for a recess, so we'll be in recess for 5 minutes. Hello, I'd like to welcome you back to session. We took our break just as we were about to go back to our 2.2 bylaw 1905. We'll start our agenda with looking at the motion to lift. We had a motion before we had to break for our presenters, so I'm looking for a motion to lift that motion. Councillor Christie.
So moved.
Great, so we have a motion to lift the tabled motion, if that makes sense. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So we will bring back the motion we were looking at. Okay, so, thank you. The motion we are looking at is that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that the first sentence under Agriculture Section 12.3 of the draft Municipal Development Plan be amended to read within 1.6 kilometers or 1 mile of an urban boundary. The remaining of the paragraph would stay intact. Before we go on to discussion with that, I understand we have some more information that administration is able to give to us. So when you're ready, Barb, that's great.
Sure, there were a couple of questions that came out earlier, and we just were pulling that information when we went back. There was a question regarding the last time the Municipal Development Plan was amended, and that was in 2019, and that was due to changes made to the land use bylaw. And so we have to align those two documents, and at that point in time, we looked at just aligning the things that were changed. For example, the number of parcels that could be taken out of a quarter section. And so we did that in the 2019 with the view of doing a further review in the future. And then there were also some questions regarding the application that was denied. So that application was denied on March 2nd, 2023. They submitted an appeal, and the board decision for that appeal was issued April 6, 2023. And then they submitted their names to be on the working group, and 2 of them were appointed by council to be on working groups, and we started those working groups in May of 2023. So that gives you a bit of the timeline of how some of that activity happened.
Councillor Phobes.
Thank you, through the chair. So just remind me again, because I wasn't sitting around this table, when were the ICFs done? What year? Yeah, sorry, IDPs, my bad.
So they probably were started around 2020.
Okay, 2020, okay.
All of them were a little bit different, so I would say maybe the earliest was 2019, and then they went to 2022.
And then just for clarity, this is just for my own personal knowledge. After the IDPs were done, who from the province oversaw that they were correct to the standards they were looking for? Or no one looked at them, just for my own information?
So what's,
Mr. Hogan?
Through Madam Chair, basically we had to inform the province that they were done, and they needed that confirmation from both municipalities.
Okay, and that was it?
Yes.
Interesting, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I will add one point. In the Municipal Government Act, there is a list of things that had to be in the intermunicipal development plan, as well as a list of things that you can address in the intermunicipal development plan. And so those are usually listed in the front of the IDPs, but we are bound by those legislated pieces.
Yes. Thank you for that clarity. Any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion to discuss. Is there any other questions or discussion to the motion before I call the question? Okay, so the motion reads that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that the first sentence under Agricultural Section 12.3 of the draft Municipal Development Plan be amended to read within 1.6 kilometers or 1 mile of an urban boundary. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Great. And so then we also then need to look at the whole rest of this conversation. Is there anything else we need to be discussing? Did we miss any holes there, Ms. Hazelton, that you saw? Nope. Any further discussion for us to go forward with the recommendation on the plan? So I'll be looking for a motion. Mr. Hogan?
Through Madam Chair, so for clarity, if there's, if there's nothing else from Committee of the Whole, then administration will go make the amendments talked about today, so the one formally made as well as some of the grammatical ones later on. We'll do a review. I haven't heard anything indicating that we're not good to bring that back as for final reading in March.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councilor Cunningham?
So certainly not a hill I want to die on, but I was just kind of looking at the economic section, and I was looking at section 18 where it says the county recognizes the importance of promoting local economy and strives to build a culture that fosters opportunities. I love it. I'm just not sure when I read that if I know what how we're going to do that, but I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be in this document. And then 20 as well, the county is supportive of local businesses and will continue to stand behind businesses. Again, I'm wondering if we wanted more meat to that, but maybe in this document that's enough. I am on page 24 of the document, yeah.
So would I be correct in explaining those 2 points? Are there so that we're giving intent of what our vision is to look like, but how that's clarified and what the action plans and policies, et cetera, around those specific items, there would be separate documents and separate pieces of information than this document. Is that accurate? Mr. Hogan?
Through the chair, that is. The municipal development plan is really it's a 30,000 foot document. So you're not getting all the specific details in there, but it's saying the activities of the county should align with these. Those specific details are still going to be worked out in other operations, other plans, like the economic development plan as an example.
Does that suit you, Councillor Cunningham? Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts? If not, I'm looking for a motion to recommend that we bring the draft municipal development plan back to the March 11th council meeting with the requested changes for third reading, which would be the final reading. Councillor Penner?
I'd make that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So what we're voting on here is this is the best draft we can come up with, not whether or not we're saying, yes, this is the hill we're going to die on. We are saying, I think it's as amended as much as we can get it together, and this is our best ending document. So all those in favor of that the Committee of Whole recommend to Council that the draft municipal plan be brought back to March 11th council meeting with with all the requested changes for third reading. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Opposed, right? You said yes? Yeah, good. I second guessed my eyesight. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so back to our agenda. I understand we do not have anything on closed session, is that correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. Okay, so that looks like we're looking at adjournment at 12:02. Thank you, everyone. It's a good evening, good day, morning, something. Good thing I closed before I spoke well.